Well, the NHL trade deadline is in the books, but there's plenty of fantasy hockey still to talk about on the Sportsnet Fantasy Forecheck, brought to you by the Ram 1500 Sport. Andy McNamara alongside Nick Alberga.
Greetings.
And Nick, today, hey man, we're going to go through some keep and drop options for you when it comes to the home stretch, really, of the fantasy hockey season. We're also going to get to our Sportsnet Fantasy Hockey Pool value picks and who you're going to want to tag up, win some cash in the Ram Sportsnet Fantasy Hockey Pool. But first, some news and notes. Follow-up from the trade deadline. What did you like fantasy-wise?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable, Andy, that we're, 35 days away from the end of another NHL regular season. And with that, we turn our sole focus after the trade deadline, as you mentioned, to the fantasy hockey playoffs upcoming for those of you in head-to-head leagues over the next couple of weeks. And so that's the one thing we're looking at here to sort of tie a bow on the NHL trade deadline from a fantasy perspective. I think when push comes to shove, I still like the Jason Zucker pickup the most for the Pittsburgh Penguins through 10 games. He has 5 goals and 2 assists, 7 points. I just think that's my biggest impact in terms of pickups. I know it was well before the deadline that deal was consummated between Minnesota and Pittsburgh. I like that quite a bit. Tyler Toffoli, that fit with the Vancouver Canucks. I'd be all over adding him. Certainly the big one for me this week is Andreas Athanasiou, who comes over by way of Detroit. 5-on-5 exposure to Connor McDavid. Don't expect much from a power play dimension because he's not on PP1. Edmonton's got the best power play unit in the league, but I think it's enough playing with McDavid 5-on-5 that we fully have to be behind endorsing a pickup of Andreas Athanasiou. So we like that.
What about Tyler Ennis as far as on that line as well? Had a nice start, had the 1 goal, 1 assist, but not as high on your radar, right?
Yeah, I think Tyler Ennis is more of a waiver flyer, especially in a week like this where Edmonton has 4 games. I would certainly take a flyer on Tyler Ennis, just more so because of the exposure. I think we will see some different looks from a 5-on-5 perspective, top 6 for Edmonton as they continue to scrounge and look for goals. It can't be Draisaitl. It can't be McDavid all the time, and that's their hope with Athanasiou. So Ennis is going to be sprinkled in there. Certainly on the top line, but don't be shocked even if a Zach Kassian, who returned from the 7-game suspension on Saturday night.
For now, he's back.
Yeah, until his next sweet chin music, Shawn Michaels style. But definitely, I think when you look at Ennis, there is some value there. I think furthermore, there is a sprinkle of value when you look at guys like J.G. Pajot and Eric Gustafsson, who comes over from Calgary or to Calgary from Chicago. Lesser extent when it comes to Ilya Kovalchuk. Vinny Trocheck's being utilized in the third-line center role right now for Carolina, so I'm not crazy about that fit just yet. But certainly some guys you want to monitor, even a Wayne Simmons second line with the Buffalo Sabres. I think when you look at streamer plays, I think you look at some guys like that who can gain a bit of a boost here from being dealt.
Yeah, maybe even a little Eric Holla.
Yeah, Holla if you hear me.
Holla if you hear me.
A lot, actually. I wrote about this in my 20 fantasy thoughts this week, that essentially he's taking over for Vinny Trocheck in the second-line center role. It's a contract year. He has exposure to the red-hot Mike Hoffman, who just continues to score. I just wonder what that contract is going to look like in the offseason. So Holla's a guy I expect to really pick up his play. Not to the extent of the way he produced at Vegas level a couple years back, but
he was strong to start this year too.
Yeah,
exactly. Some runs.
I mean, never underestimate the contract value in a guy playing for a new contract and a new fit and a new organization. So definitely Eric Holla is a guy we're looking at, and I would say monitor closely right now, Andy.
Injury replacements every week. The list just keeps growing. Steven Stamkos. Olofsson we talked about before as well. Like there's just injury replacements all up and down. This is such a key time of year to have to really see what you can pick up, Nick, because either your fantasy trade deadline is gone or coming up.
Yeah.
And waiver wires, like this is go time. It's a push to your fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly. I've been preaching patience all season long when it comes to roster maneuvering and decisions. We'll throw that out the door. I mean, you want to be assertive and proactive.
Yeah, gotta go for it.
And go after it, essentially. First and foremost, you looked at Victor Olofsson. Not much in terms of the word as we speak right now on this Sunday morning when it comes to that injury. Hurt in Arizona, lower body injury, we suspect. On Saturday night. Did not look good. Jeff Skinner, I'm all over this guy. He finally snapped that ruthless, 23-game goalless drought, longest of his career. He's actually scored in back-to-back games. And another deadline pickup in Dominic Cahoon, who goes from Pittsburgh to Buffalo in that deal involving Connor Sherry going back to Pitt. I think there's some value there in the second line for Dominic Cahoon. Patrick Laine, I think a logical replacement as long as he's slated to miss some time for the Jets. Jack Roslovic, who can move up and down that Jets lineup.
Okay.
Steven Stamkos has the core muscle issue. He'll be done for the regular season, so you pretty much can drop him at this point. But Tampa's got so much depth, and this is a luxury they do have on that roster right now. I like Anthony Cirelli, Andre Palat, Blake Coleman for rest of season purposes. I think they're going to be elevated in the lineup with no Stamkos there. And Mark Stone, I think we've endorsed this quite a bit on the season, but Chandler Stevenson is a guy who is time in and time out showed the ability to move up that Vegas lineup. So with Mark Stone out, you want to look there. Let's look at the positional looks externally. Michael Backlund has been on fire for the Calgary Flames. Nikita Gusev, Brandon Saad for Chicago. From a right wing perspective, you look at those guys. Left wing, Mikhail Granlund with the Nashville Predators has been hot. Rope Hintz, Adam Henrique with the Anaheim Ducks, and Zach Parise. And to Adam Parise as well, I mean, just the boost of knowing that you were almost dealt to the New York Islanders almost certainly will get him going a bit offensively. The Wild in general have been, really, really strong the last little while. And we can go to the goaltending market as well. Jacob Markstrom, that's a big-time injury.
You lose Markstrom, Demko's in. And earlier in the year, Demko had a nice little run for a while, but that's certainly going to hurt.
Yeah, it is. And it just, it just shows you the vast importance of a tandem share in this league. And no doubt, Jacob Markstrom, the number one for the Vancouver Canucks. And I do think he masked a bit of Vancouver defensively speaking, because Demko's had his issues, in the first 3 games without Jacob Markstrom. But I'm still fully behind picking up Thatcher Demko. I think it's been a season of streaks for the Vancouver Canucks, and I do think they'll find their way don the stretch here. They're still growing. Do not forget that. They're relatively young when it comes to some of the nucleus on that roster and being in meaningful hockey games here in the month of March. 2 other goalies I would look at. I know Henrik Lundqvist, as we speak, is starting on this Sunday, his first start since February 3rd. Just 6th appearance in 2020. So I still think it's Alexander Georgiev's crease going forward. The Rangers fighting for their playoff lives. Not to mention Chris Kreider's another guy we left off that, you look at left wing options. I think you look at those guys in replacement of Chris Kreider. Even, guys on that Rangers roster like a Capo Caco and a Brendan Lemieux should be elevated in play with no Kreider, by the way. But I think goalies, Georgiev's another guy to look at if you're not crazy about picking up Demko. And Alex Stalock is my sneaky play of the week when it comes to goaltenders. He's a veteran, knows his role. But Dean Evison takes over in an interim rollover for Bruce Boudreau. The Wild, as we speak, have won 5 of 7. 4-1-0 is Alex Stalock, and he's started 5 of those 7 games, so a bit of value certainly right there too.
I like those. Now, schedule manipulation, and you talked about the Tampa Bay Lightning and Stamkos being out. They're one of 9 4-game teams this week, and that's going to be very interesting, Nick, to see who. It's good timing from a fantasy side because we're going to get a lot of meat to see who really can try to take the spot of Stamkos or at least elevate themselves.
Yeah, definitely. That's going to be the theme and the key going forward here on the Fantasy Forecheck the next couple of weeks is preparation and strategizing for your upcoming fantasy hockey playoffs. And a big tool for me that I love to use not only in the playoffs but in the regular season is schedule manipulation, as you all know for long-time watchers of this program throughout this season. There are actually 2 teams who have 4-game slates this week that I'm all over. And also a team in the Calgary Flames who play just 3 times, say Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. That's a valuable schedule in my books because they're quiet nights. And all 3 are home games for Calgary: Columbus, Arizona, Vegas. Michael Backlund, less than 40% ownership right now. I think you have to look at him. He's been on fire. And Andrew Mangiapane, he has been hot for the last month, been producing goals left and right. I think you look there. From a Sportsnet fantasy hockey pool perspective, Johnny Gaudreau will talk about. David Riddick and Eric Gustafson, I think, provides a bit of value in terms of a waiver play, especially in a week where we like the schedule for Calgary. I think he's better served to run that Calgary power play over Mark Giordano. Some may disagree with me on that front, but maybe you take less minutes away from Giordano, who is a bit longer in the tooth, and give him Gustafson. And he got 60 points last year around there for Chicago running that power play, so don't overlook that. 4-game slates. Look at Colorado this week at the Anaheim Ducks. First and foremost, the Avalanche on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday for them. Look at newcomer Vlad Nemestikov, around 10% ownership right now. And Tyson Jost, around 1 or 2% right now. A couple-game point streak going here. And again, I always like to look at guys who were in trade rumors that ultimately were not dealt. Jost, his name was out there firmly on the trade market around the deadline, did not go. And lo and behold, since then, he's been producing point after point, and he's playing on the first power play unit right now with the exposure to McKinnon.
And only 2% ownership.
Exactly. I mean, there's so much value in that play. Clearly, you have to look at McKinnon, Pavel Francouz, I think you probably have to house him on your roster this week.
Love
the guy
Francouz.
doesn't lose, and he's 3-point value, and Cale Makar at 2-point value.
Michael Hutchinson being added doesn't scare you away from Francouz, huh?
Moving on.
Hutch!
Then you mentioned the 2-game teams. You want to stay away from waiver pickups. Arizona, Florida, Los Angeles, and Winnipeg. They're not playing much. So look at the four-game teams, and don't be shy to go to the 3-game teams either.
This is a section we want to get to in drop or no drop. And the reason this is really relevant at this point of the year in the fantasy hockey season, Nick, is because, as we just said before, this is the time you got to go for it.
Yeah.
Whether it's seeding, whether it's to just get into the playoffs. So we preach patience. You want to hold on to name guys as long as possible.
It's tough.
Because they'll come back maybe. You keep holding out hope. But at some point, if there's a better option, you got to cut bait. You got to go.
Yeah.
But which one? So we put together a few names, beginning with Brent Burns of the San Jose Sharks. And I'm going to be firmly on the keep side with Brent Burns here, Nick, because the Sharks, we know they're bad. I just can't drop him. He's the 8th best fantasy defenseman on total points this year. The minus 22 is dirty. Okay?
Yeah, well,
the Sharks are terrible. I'm still going to be comfortable holding on to Brent Burns at this time.
Yeah, to go along the lines of this whole segment, it really is difficult when we put fantasy rankings together at the season. There's just a loyalty type card to it.
Yeah.
And you're right. Like this time of year, you've got to make decisions. It was still difficult for me to drop PK Subban 2 weeks ago just because I thought he was going to be huge in New Jersey, and it just you got to move on from that. Brent Burns, I laughed at the stat on Saturday night that Leon Draisaitl has 101 points. Brent Burns leads the San Jose Sharks with 43 points. There is a slight contrast there, but I'm with you in the fact that you can never sleep on teams that are finished, and San Jose is not completely done in terms of playing for stuff this year. I think they know internally in that locker room that they do not own their first-round picks, so they sort of owe it to their organization to play some strong hockey down the stretch, and I think there'll be some point value going forward. They won 5-0 against the slumping Pittsburgh Penguins on Saturday night. And Brent Burns, even regardless of his struggles this season from an offensive standpoint, everything comes from Brent Burns in the back end. There's no Karlsson, so I think there's still value in holding on to Brent Burns.
Johnny Gaudreau, Johnny Hockey. Now, he was projected to be the 15th best fantasy player in Yahoo Leagues, 89th overall. Just incredibly disappointing. 16 goals. He's somebody, dual wing eligibility. If there is a better option on waivers, I guess I don't mind holding on to a Johnny Gaudreau at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I have more faith in a Brent Burns than a Johnny Gaudreau.
Yeah,
There's just something about Calgary that's off this season. They talked about addressing their depth situation, which they have, and Backlund's been a great story, but I would say the Lucic trade has certainly not favored Calgary as we speak, even though James Neal is injured right now. And they're, as far as I know, Sean Monahan is dealing with some sort of hand injury, and maybe that's plaguing his play a bit this season. But Johnny Gaudreau just seems a bit off too. And Calgary's, in a long list of teams, in my opinion, that could be in store for big internal changes if things don't go well for them in the Stanley Cup playoffs, provided they get there to begin with. But something's just off with them offensively. And Gaudreau's a guy I would probably contemplate moving on from because he's really, again, as you lamented, not really producing at the point we expected. Certainly as a guy I firmly had in my top 20. So I'd be open to the idea of moving on. Taylor
Hall of the Arizona Coyotes next. Nick, this is a big. I'm gonna pull out a Snoop Dogg. I'm dropping him like he's hot.
Yeah.
Okay. He's on. No, I'm not interested. The year's done. Okay.
Yeah.
There's name recognition, of course, and that's sometimes where you get hang on. Oh, is he? I think he's been moved too many times. It's just not his year. You cut ties, you reboot, and hope for a better next year. I'm done with Taylor Hall.
Yeah, I think we're going to drop it like it's hot when it comes to both Taylor Hall and his teammate Phil Kessel. I watch a lot of Arizona Coyotes hockey more than I should admit. Yeah, I know, more than I should admit, because all you out there just know I just nonstop hockey watcher here. But Arizona just doesn't play a scheme that's conducive to some of the players they have, especially those two. They're game breakers. Open it up a bit. But every time I watch them, it's 2-1 hockey. And when you're not even producing a point per game from a fantasy perspective, you're providing little to no value for fantasy owners. And especially how crucial this time a year is, I'm probably moving on. If you have your playoffs coming up this week, by the way, as I do in one of my leagues, Arizona plays just twice. Are you really holding out hope for a 2-game week when it comes to Hall or Kessel? Probably not. Maybe you think about holding on to them going forward because, again, it's back-to-back 2-game weeks, so the power numbers suggest there's a lot of hockey to be played over the next couple leading into the playoffs for Arizona, so maybe you think about it, but these guys are doing nothing right now.
No.
And certainly I would not be opposed to moving on. Gabe Landeskog's another intriguing name in Colorado.
Yeah, I just want to touch on Kessel for one more minute because as soon as I saw the name on the list, I was like, yes! But Phil Kessel, it's finally come out where the lack of conditioning over the years, 33 years old, he's just been horrendous. And if he's not scoring goals, he contributes nothing else. So Phil Kessel, drop 100%. I've been waiting for this since he was with the Maple Leafs. So Phil Kessel, absolute dog, not interested in Kessel. But Landeskog, I dropped him in one of my fantasy leagues last week.
Yeah.
And this is, again, somebody else with the expectations were huge. Nick, here's, and projections, take for them what you will. But he was projected to be the 30th overall fantasy player. You know where he is right now? 234.
Yeah.
234th. I like the center and left wing eligibility. I just think we've talked about all year. There's so much depth out there at forward. I think I can move on from Landeskog.
You better run for the hills from producer Drew Livingstone after this show because he's going to be hunting on a witch hunt for you, Andy McNamara.
No. Oh boy.
But you're right. Like I'm moving on from Gabe Landeskog as well. I love Colorado's depth this season. Even a rookie, Martin Kautz, looked really, really good the last couple games. They bring in Vlad Nemesnikov. Like, there's a lot of value in sort of, they're continuing to win games, and I would say for Nathan MacKinnon, he's on a quiet streak right now, and he's sort of cold, but it doesn't matter because there's so many different guys who've been scoring. Cale Makar is having an outstanding season. Samuel Girard. Even Nazem Kadri out of this lineup right now. So I think Colorado's depth has cost Landeskog a couple points maybe. And just from a fantasy perspective, he doesn't always translate. I correlate him to sort of like a Jonathan Taves in Chicago, right? Like an unbelievable hockey player, but sometimes it doesn't really translate well to fantasy hockey. So I'm with that. And last but not least, we have the cat, Alex DeBrincat. Now, initially, he comes over, his buddy, his best friend comes over, Dylan Strome from Arizona, and it's seamless. It's like they're with Erie all over again. And this season, I always am fascinated with players who sign massive extensions in their first years. More times than not, they seem to struggle or not play up to potential or play like previous years, and I think that's exactly what's happening to DeBrincat. He's a file I'm dumping out on this season. I'm done with Alex DeBrincat. That said, he'll be up my rankings more than most people next year because Alex DeBrincat, we know he has it in him, and there'll be less stress.
Bounce back candidate.
Yeah, he's a massive bounce back candidate for me. So I would say drop out and call it a year on Alex DeBrincat, but next year I'm back all over that.
I'm gonna do Roman Emperor and go thumbs down on DeBrincat because Nick, here's the double whammy when it comes to DeBrincat. Not only if you have him in your lineup is he playing poorly, but he has multiple negative point fantasy games. So if you have him in your lineup, you're not having fun that way, and then he's costing you more points.
Yeah.
He is a complete liability. You just cannot have him in. But I'm with you as a bounce back candidate, possibly for next year. What I'm also interested in is winning some money, Nick. How about that? In the Rams Sportsnet Fantasy Hockey Pool, in this show, the Fantasy Forecheck is brought to you by the Canadian exclusive Ram 1500 Sport. This full-size pickup gives Canadians exceptional capability under the hood, advanced technology inside, and impeccable styling throughout. It's the Ram 1500 Sport, and it's designed for life in the North. And all year long, we tell you, if you've been playing all year, you can also jump in at any time and just head on over to fantasy.sportsnet.ca to play. In this fantasy pool, you got 6 forwards to pick, 4 defenders, 2 goalies, and in each position group, you pick 1 player to put the Ram capable tag on. That's where you get the double fantasy points. So this week, we're going to pick one of our Ram capable picks and 2 value plays. So who's your Ram capable tag?
Connor McDavid, go on.
Let's do it.
Everybody knows the rules at this point.
Connor!
If McDavid's got 4 games, McDavid or Draisaitl are easy picks when it comes to 4-game slates. Just move on.
No doubt. And I'm going with Colorado, Nathan MacKinnon, right?
Another.
Even like you said, where he's been on a little bit of a slow streak for him.
Hot streak's coming.
Exactly, for him. And if I'm getting an extra game out of Nathan MacKinnon, I'm going to take it, right? So I'm going to do that.
Suck value plays,
Let's do value plays. Yeah. What do you got for value?
Okay, I'm going to start with Pittsburgh, and we talked about, it comes full circle from the top of the show here. I love the fit, Jason Zucker in Pittsburgh. He has 5 goals, 2 assists, 7 points in 10 games. In fact, the Pens now on a 6-game losing streak, and I believe just Zucker has 5 of those 8 goals in the last 6 games in this losing streak. Like, it's insane. and he's playing with Crosby. The 2-point value in a 30-point cap system, I cannot overlook that. So Jason Zucker is one of my value plays. And the other, we'll go with both of ours right now. I like Alex Stalock quite a bit. We talked about him.
Yeah.
You know, the values there, with the 2-point value in a 30 cap league, especially when it comes to goalies. Most of the guys are around 4, like the elite guys are 4, the rest are 3, and then you find a guy like you know, Alex Stalock at 2 points. You have to be all over that. He started 5 of 7 games for Minnesota. It's a 4-game week, and he's 4-1-0 in those 5 games. So there's extreme value there. Who do you got?
Yeah, Dominic Kubalik for my value play. Now, I had him as my waiver wire pickup last week. Now, from a value point, he is 1 point price tag. And he had a hat trick Thursday, right? Listen, at this point, if you don't bet on Kubalik, Nick, you're going to go broke, okay? You got to get yourself some Dominic Kubalik at the 1 point value. Great season. He's up to 29 goals. Like, this is somebody who still is relatively flying under the radar. So I like him as a 1 point to slap him in there. And then number 2, Jean-Gabriel Pageau. Hot start to the year. We chatted about him a lot. And he cooled down a bit, got dealt to the Islanders. And this is somebody who we question if the fit is right, but revenge game, Nick. You're big on the revenge game.
Those are always big. Yeah, you're right. I still see Pageau as like this year's Ryan Dzingel, where he was elevated in the lineup in Ottawa, goes elsewhere, and will slot into a better role. Third line center makes the most sense. Another guy I'll add to before we wrap up here is Andreas Athanasiou, 1 point value.
Yeah.
He's got the exposure to McDavid. Again, it comes full circle to everything we've been talking about in the theme of this program, post-deadline edition. So there's a lot of value out there when it comes to the Sportsnet fantasy hockey pool in terms of guys with low costs, and that can allow you the ability to stock up the bigger boys.
It sure does. We want to hear from you as well. Leave your comments below in the comment section or on Twitter at The Golden Muzzy, at AndyMC81. This has been the Fantasy Forecheck brought to you by Ram on Sportsnet. We'll see you next week.